So, Travis, thank you again for coming today and telling us about Claimer Power. I am going to turn it over to you. Please feel free to dig in and share what you like, and then I'll come back on when you feel like you've completely exhausted every piece of knowledge you have in your brain. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here. My name is Travis Gibrael. I am the research and education organizer with Reclaim Our Power, the utility justice campaign. I see Paul's Grid Alternative shirt on there. For the last 5 years, I've also been a solar technician for a small nonprofit called Sunwork, which is based out of Milpitas here in the Bay Area. And so I came to this work kind of with a technical background. I got 5 years of work on systems. I've got some electrical background. I was hired by the campaign because I knew a thing or two about microgrids. And so I was initially charged with supporting CBOs, community-based organizations, to implement microgrids in the form of resilience hubs. But as that project kind of faded away, I kind of stepped into the role of the research coordinator. I have, a decent amount of technical background, and yeah, a lot of the ideas and solutions that we've been putting forth. I'm in a lot of conversation with energy wonks and always developing my own knowledge. And so yeah, with this presentation. I'm going to keep it on the short side. I'm going to keep it to about 10 minutes as best I can, because as Dave was saying, as David was saying, we want it to be a dialogue and a conversation. And so I think a lot of the more probing questions would love to have those emerge through questions rather than me lecturing. Um, so I'm going to start screen sharing. Give me one moment. Um, Great. Okay, so where to begin? So the Reclaim Our Power Utility Justice Campaign is not an organization so much as a coalition. We were born in 2019. I think a lot of folks in this room probably remember it was when PG&E went into bankruptcy for their liabilities for causing the campfire and causing, I mean, technically they caused about 5,000 fires between 2012 and 2017. But there was a series of years in there where every year they were causing all these major wildfires, and so the liabilities built up. They went into bankruptcy, and there was this moment of extreme vulnerability where everybody had an opinion about what should we do with this utility. Um, and those conversations were always dominated by insiders and utility executives and maybe some ratepayer advocates, but nobody really from frontline communities were involved in those conversations. And so a lot of EJ organizations, including at the time APEN, CEJA, CBE, Movement Generation, PODER, North Bay Organizing Project, um, came together, Local Clean Energy Alliance, came together and said, we need to put our voice in the room. We need our voices at the table. And as far as I know, it really was kind of the first time that a major EJ coalition came together saying, like, what do frontline communities really think should happen to this energy system? Um, and so it was at the time of AB 1054, which was a bill that was basically created to shield PG&E from any future liabilities from the wildfires that they were destined to keep sparking, right? And so we fought really hard against that. Um, Obviously, we failed. It passed a week after it was introduced. It was a gut and fill bill. So there's a bill that had no language, was totally scooped out, new language is put in, and it was rammed through the legislature. But anyways, so this is all to say that it came at a moment where there were a lot of ideas about what should happen to the energy system. Sam Liccardo, the former mayor of San Jose, proposed turning PG&E into a co-op and circulated a letter that got hundreds of signatories from city council members and mayors and members of board supervisors. Um, let's see, Scott Wiener introduced a bill that called for a public takeover of PG&E. So there were a lot of conversations flying around at the time. Ultimately, we all know what happened. The governor basically stabilized PG&E. The governor has a long, long history of being supported by PG&E. And things basically went back to normal, and our bills started to skyrocket. And so in the time since then, we have been really developing our vision for what is needed to really transform this energy system. Um, and I will say that we come from a really strong justice framework. And I recognize that it, it's language that is not everybody's cup of tea. If you move across the political spectrum, some people don't like language around reparations, environmental justice, corporate accountability, frontline leadership. But that's our perspective. That's where we're coming from. Indigenous sovereignty and land back. But so ultimately, our analysis comes down to the way that IOU's business model is structurally set up. So, a lot of people and we talked about this kind of like I don't know who in the room who's on this call for whom this would be new information, or for the energy wonks in the room who obviously could tell this story better than I could. But basically, energy IOUs don't make money by selling energy. They make money by building things, right? But because they are for-profit corporations, their goal is to maximize profits in whatever way they can, right? And so the main way that they can do that is by building a lot of really expensive things. The more expensive it is, the higher of a rate of return they can get, and as a result, it structurally sets up the system to be as expensive as possible. And this is the point that we just like really, really keep hitting home, right? So last year, PG&E announced that they made $2.5 billion in profits. And that means that we all overpaid on our bills by $2.5 billion so this money could be distributed to shareholders. And the short version of that is the more things that they can build, the more expensive it is to build it. The more money they can skim off, and the more money that they can deliver as dividends. So as a result, some of these statistics you'll see on this slide, PG&E customers now pay the highest rates in the continental United States. SCE customers pay the second highest, and SDG&E pay the third highest. Our rates have increased 56% in the last 3 years. It's 4 times the national average, and it far outpaces inflation. Last year, they gave out $2.5 billion in profits, as I said, and as a result, 20% of Californians in a state of 40 million people, that's over 8 million people, are behind on their utility bills. So that's not just people that are struggling to pay, that's people who are actively behind. They're in arrears. And so if you get far enough behind on your bills, you're going to get your power shut off. And last year, 317,000 families had their power shut off due to inability to pay. And so our analysis is, we can argue about the cost shift of solar. We can argue about energy efficiency programs and equity programs that are meant to support low-income people. But at the end of the day, the reason that our bills are so high is that it is structurally set up to be as expensive as possible in order to deliver the largest returns as possible to shareholders. And so our solution, as simplistic as it sounds, is to create an energy system that takes out the profit motive. So we want to see a transition to a not-for-profit utility. And that is, so just really quickly, the other harms of the for-profit model, high rates. It's less safe, right? So if they want to maximize their returns, one of the places that they can cut costs is on maintenance. And there's been a lot of reporting, particularly in the time around the wildfires in 2017, 2018, about how PG&E had chronically for decades cut back on safety measures and maintenance measures in order to cut costs and generate larger profits. And when you do that, you get a less reliable system. You get a system that's crumbling, it's falling apart, um, and that leads to destruction. So it's interesting because you somehow managed to get both an overbuilt system and an under-maintained system. So it's fragile, it's decrepit, it's falling apart, and it's full of all kinds of unnecessary infrastructure projects that exist to raise profits. And so, yeah, it's not just a bad apple. The IOU business model you can see compared to the public utilities in the state, the rates of the IOUs are off the charts. On average, we always like to point to SMUD because in 1946, up until 1946, they used to be part of PG&E. Then they broke off and created their own utility. It took them 30 years to pay off the cost of their system. But by the 70s, they had paid down their debt, and now their rates are 58% lower than PG&E's. Which brings us to SB332, which I know you've tuned in to hear about that. And so at the core of it and where the idea for it really came from was an idea that we need a feasibility study in order to determine what the costs and benefits of transitioning from an IOU model to a not-for-profit utility model. And we decided to stay agnostic on it. So we're not pushing for a public ownership. We're not pushing for what's already in state law in SB 350, the Golden State Energy Act, which is a public benefit nonprofit. We said, let's look at them all. Let's see a comparative analysis of a public option, a cooperative option, and SB 350. And within that analysis is all the questions that anyone would ask. How would this be paid for? How much would it cost? Like who's responsible for the liabilities of future wildfires? How are those paid for? All these questions are answered within the study, and because the people of California, deserve the answers to these questions, right? And so we think the CEC should really invest in getting us answers that we can all look at, and then we can debate what should happen to the energy system based on that. Also included in the feasibility study is what we call justice design features, which is to say, if you could build a new utility from scratch, which, if you were to replace PG&E and the other IOUs with a new utility, it would be built from scratch in essence. How would it be different from the status quo? How would you center justice in its policies, in its governance, in its operations, in its finances? And then finally, an implementation plan. What is a legally defensible implementation plan to make this a reality? So that's the core of the bill. But in order to run the bill, we wanted to include, and Senator Wahhab's office, who's running the bill, said like, okay, we love the feasibility, but we can't run it on feasibility. We need to have more immediate fixes that will really address some of the other issues in a shorter term kind of a way. And so that is broken down into essentially two buckets. There's an affordability bucket and there's a safety bucket. The affordability bucket, we have a cap on rate increases pegged to the consumer price index. Now, obviously, we know that the way that rates are made, involves all the different expenses, and to just have a hard ceiling doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Because there's there's always contingencies, there's always realities. But in a way, we're looking at this more like an emergency brake. We're saying like our rates have been increasing so out of control that for now, this is making a statement that like at the very least, inflation should be the ceiling of how our rates increase in the near term. Second, this is a little bit arcane, but AB 1054 created the Wildfire Fund. And what it is, it's basically, it's the insurance policy that will pay for future wildfires that happen in the states caused by the IOUs. It was capitalized at $21 billion initially, and 50% of that money, $10.5 billion, comes directly off of our rates. And the other half comes from the utilities, comes from their profits, right? But we also know that their profits come out of our rates as well. So we're directly and indirectly paying for that. So at the very least, our fight was, okay, Right now, we're paying 50% directly on our bills. That should be reduced down to 5%. Um, on the safety front, we have a portion that the Center for Biological Diversity has been working on for many years, and it's a ban on utility shutoffs due to inability to pay. Initially it was a ban for everybody, but it was watered down a little bit. So now it's just certain vulnerable populations. It includes pregnant women, it includes children under 5, it includes elders, it includes people with disabilities. Um, and the number one pushback that they get about that is that if people knew that they didn't have to pay their bills and there wouldn't be any consequences, then people would just stop paying their bills. Well, luckily, we have a case study of a place where that same policy was already implemented. It's in Chicago with their water district, and their data shows that they have a 95% repayment rate. And so, and the talking point that we really want to elevate is that all of the shutoffs that happened last year could have been paid for, like all of the arrears, all of the shutoffs could have been paid for by less than 2% of the profits that were given out to the shareholders, right? And so we have this scenario in which there's so many people who are struggling to make ends meet in the state of California. They can't afford their utility bills. Um, and yet these massive amounts of money are being given out to shareholders that it would be a rounding error to just pay for all of these debts that poor people in the state of California have accrued. And so just like really highlighting this inequity that's built into a system that is at its base built on extraction from people in order to enrich the owning class. So then second on the safety kick, we have annual audits of equipment and mandatory replacement of equipment past its usable life. We included this because it was a direct response to the Camp Fire, in which the hook that broke and lit that fire was 30 years past its usable life. And it
Well,
had been affected by PG&E, but they had shrugged it off and continued moving forward. And so what this does is it actually requires a third-party auditor to come in and really inspect the equipment. And uh, for all parts of the system that are found to be out of compliance, there are fines that are enacted that can't be passed on to ratepayers, and out of those fines, finances the replacement of the equipment. Third part is executive compensation pegged to safety metrics rather than financials. Critics will point out that executive compensation is not paid for by ratepayers, not paid for out of our rates, right? But the response to that is essentially that so long as maximizing profits, so long as lowering costs and juicing up financials is connected to executive compensation, the choices that they're going to make is going to be based on that, which will always mean that safety will be a lower priority. And so we're not trying to change it just because it's unfair that it comes out of our bills. I mean, all the profits come out of our bills ultimately. But we're saying that when you have perverse incentives to make certain choices, then you end up with a worse system as a result. And so then the fourth part is build back resilient after wildfires by undergrounding or more cost-effective measures. And so the undergrounding portion is the part a lot of our allies have had a problem with because they say undergrounding is the most expensive approach to dealing with wildfire problems, and that's why the utilities love to do it because they can make the largest returns every time they underground anything. And so we've had that same critique. We've been really, really vocal pushing back against undergrounding. And so at this point, with new amendments to the bill, it's undergrounding or more cost-effective measures, which includes building microgrids. It includes insulating wires, something called syncophasers, which are basically like quick kill switches. So if a line breaks, it's already dead by the time it hits the ground, so it can't spark a new fire. And SDG&E have implemented a lot of those in their system, and their rate of sparking fires has actually plummeted. So it's a safety measure that I think holds a lot of really strong evidence to support it. Um, so that's what's in the bill. I would love to talk more about kind of the perverse incentives built into the profit motive, but honestly, I just want to hear what questions are coming up for folks and what kind of feedback, what kind of
well,
conversation you.
awesome. Thank you, Travis. That's a great presentation, great information, and I'm excited to think that this could become a reality sometime in the near future. So I saw people were popping questions in the chat. We're going to give priority to people who want to come on camera and ask their question. I just have a few requests, having done this a lot. Try and keep your question to about a minute. And if you want to promote something you're doing while you're asking your question, that's great, but still try and keep it to a minute. And if you don't have questions, I got a dozen of them lined up. But Danette, would you like to go first? Come off mute and we'll entertain your question.
Sorry, I forgot to do that. Thank you so much. This is so helpful. What I think I put this in the chat, but what are you doing to get the word out? I know people realize their bills keep going up and they might not know why. In terms of educating the public, what can we do? What are you doing? Et cetera, et cetera.
That's a great question. I appreciate that. So I will say that we are at Reclaim Our Power first and foremost organizers. And so when I find myself in wonkier spaces, it's a disclaimer that I always have to make that like we're organizers, right? And so for us, it is about the cultural and the narrative shift more than anything else. And so we have traditionally moved by way of coalition, and that is reaching out to organizations and so our email blasts are more directed at other organizations that can forward them onto their members. We're not really a base building organization, but it's like really, kind of getting more people to the table kind of approach. So I will say the core of our work, and this bill is a really exciting moment for us. But the core of our work really is that organizing portion. And so what we're doing is we're doing popular education sessions around the state. We're working with EJ partners to host them and to bring a lot, to fill the room, so to speak. Our next one's going to be in Stockton, for example. And we had one in Fresno last month. We had one in Berkeley recently. Had one in Richmond. But so it's popular education. It's really teaching people how the IOU business model works and why it's structurally set up to be extractive and to be expensive, and that's where the affordability crisis comes from. But then turning around and saying, like, if you want to do something about this, go to your city council. Obviously, your city government has no say over this, but if the city government declares that energy should be a human right. Energy should not be for profit. It is a monopoly industry. If you don't like PG&E, there's no other alternative. You can't just change your phone plan, right? So go to the city council and have them pass a resolution that says, Sacramento, this is untenable for our people. You need to make a change. And our belief is that we're really not we're skeptical that lawmakers in Sacramento are going to be willing to make a change until there's really evidence of a lot of things.
Yeah, I've seen enough of it. I've been an activist for years, and I actually worked on the single payer, trying to get single payer in California, and Democratic Party and Newsom threw up every roadblock they could. So the writing's on the wall. We know what we're up against. I'm glad to hear that you're having equity partners and also land back organizations, hopefully, because Indigenous people know how to manage the land. That's why, you need to
Absolutely.
include them. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're strong supporters of tribal sovereignty. Like if tribes want to set up, tribal utilities,
Yep.
breaking free from PG&E or
Yep.
even subsequent not-for-profit utility, strong supporters of that. A lot
Yeah.
of people don't know this, but it's already in state law that if the utilities want to sell off some of their land, they have to give the first right of refusal to indigenous peoples,
Nice.
whoever traditional land it is. Of course, they have to buy it.
Yeah.
So we would love to see it. So
That's
they
good.
wouldn't have to pay for it. But yeah,
Yeah, it's just frustrating because it's baby steps all the time. But I mean, we all have to, if we all pitch in, hopefully we can get some of this done. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks.
totally.
Joe, how about you? What's your question?
I've got three things that I'd like to bring into the conversation. Sammy Roth, the climate writer for the LA Times, and this last two issues, two or three articles, has made the point that the IOUs are doing several things. One, they roughly on capital, they're getting a 10.5% return and they're asking for another percent,
Mhm.
which is unjustified given their $1 to $2.5 billion profit in the
We'd make
past
them
year,
the
right?
highest return in the
And
country if they
yeah,
got it.
Sammy basically said, why don't we take the capital, the safety stuff that you were talking about, Travis, and move the funding for safety into the state budget and remove it from individuals' uh, uh, but cost for energy. And if we did that, then we would be in a position where the cost to individuals would dramatically fall, and shift that cost because nearly all of the profit that the IOUs are earning is coming from the gains on safety investments, if you will, right? So that's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah,
Uh,
transmission lines, yeah.
yeah. The second, in San Diego, we have an organization called Public Power San Diego, and they are trying to create public power, obviously, in the community. Uh, had not quite enough signatures to get on the ballot last time, but they're still trying. And their focus, which is one that makes a lot of sense to me, I think, is that we should really move toward distributed energy resources. We should get our CEAs, and I think just about every city in San Diego County is now a member of a CEA and the county. Um, we should get our CEAs to implement virtual power plants with AI-driven microgrids everywhere and really strive to uh, populate rooftops and parking lots and whatever with as much solar as possible and batteries, of course. And
So
that,
I'm not
but
clear, but do you have a question for Travis?
yeah,
I know
the question is,
you,
what do you think of these ideas?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So as far as so the first point I want to point everybody's attention to SB 330, which would create pilots of building out publicly owned transmission lines. To get back to this profit motive aspect, a study that came out last year suggested that transmission lines would cost 50% less if they were not paid for by the IOUs with their rate of return, that if the state financed it and paid for it. So that would be a massive savings for the people. And so you could imagine that same concept would be system wide if the IOUs were no longer for profit. But this is like one small step in that direction. Public Power San Diego, I think, are doing great work. They're allies of ours. They're supportive of the bill. And Bill Powers has been amazing, connecting us with folks down in Southern California. As far as that DER vision of the future, I mean, as a solar guy, I'm committed to that future, and I don't personally believe it's possible so long as the IOUs are in charge. Like that's part of the reason for this call for transformation is that we need to get their interests out of the way so the interests of the people and of the land and the health of the land and an efficient usage of resources and everything connected with that can actually happen. All of our best ideas are blocked by the profit motive of the IOUs. And so yeah, and on the front of municipalization, I strongly support the idea of a city like San Diego having its own municipal utility. And in order for them to have one, and in order for San Jose to have one, and San Francisco to have one, and Oakland to have one, and Chico to have one, would be a million fights across the country, right? Or across the state. And so a lot of our vision is if you win one big fight of transitioning the whole system, then local jurisdictions can do what they want after that, right? If a local jurisdiction wants to break off and municipalize, that would become possible. But so long as, in order to municipalize, they have to fight back against the interests of SCE, SDG&E, or PG&E, those companies are going to fight tooth and nail. And it took SMUD 20 years to break off from PG&E. San Francisco has been fighting their municipalization fight for, got at least a decade, if not longer. And so a lot of our theory of change is the first step towards this kind of like localized vision for a grid of the future is to take away these moneyed interests that are blocking the possibility of change. So win the big fight, and then a million possibilities open up.
Sounds sensible.
Thank you. All right, and Joe, I'm sure you've got more questions. So if people are tapped out, we'll come back to you after I ask a question. So anyway, I see some people put them in the chat. It's been a little hard for me to track them. So if someone wants to come on and ask them, or all right. Well, I'll ask one of my questions. Travis, are you familiar? I'm assuming you're familiar with ILSR and some of their work on trying to create local utilities. Wondering how.
They're going to interview me in April, actually. I'm going to be on the show.
Okay, terrific. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of how they work, but again, they're looking at something you were just talking about, which is how to have locally owned, which helps keep the money within the state, also provides costs. I'm just wondering if they're being supportive of the bill. And, I guess maybe the larger question is, other than signing on to the letter, which will pop into the link again, what can us and other organizations do to help get this passed?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Signing on to the letter is important. We have a deadline of April 15th to have as many logos and as many organizations that say, like when we submit it, it's like if we have hundreds of organizations that say we want to see this passed, that carries some weight. The first stop of the bill is going to be the Senate Energy Utilities and Communications Committee. And so if you're a constituent of a senator that's in that committee, phone calls are always helpful. If you're in the peninsula, Senator Becker is the chair of the committee. And so, he's a prime target saying, you need to pass this bill. If it does pass the Senate, it's going to go to the Assembly. And Petrie Norris, who represents Orange County, is the chair of that committee. So she's going to be a major target. She's known as a pretty moderate Dem. And so if anyone on this call lives in Orange County or is her constituent, that would be hugely helpful, is to get some phone calls out to her office. But yeah, if you represent an organization, you can sign on to the letter of support. If you can knock on doors of other organizations that share similar values, all of it is helpful.
Thank
Danette?
you. Yeah, CAC is supporting that bill too. So if you want to join in on the letter with us, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You had a question, or?
That was just my comment that we're supporting that bill too. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Any other questions? Joe, you want to ask another one?
Well, I guess let's ask, what role do you see for the CCAs in this in the growing grid?
That's a great question. And this is one of the things that I could I could spin off and talk about this for a long time. I can't really represent our coalition because a lot of it is just like my own opinions and thoughts about it. But I will say, on its face, CCAs wouldn't be impacted by this, right? Because their role is to purchase power, and they don't actually touch the poles and wires. They don't deliver it to people's houses. What they do is really focused on billing. It's on purchasing and selling. And so with this shift to a not-for-profit, they could very easily just continue to do that. I think a great example is San Francisco is trying to municipalize, and they have a CCA in San Francisco. And their whole vision is, should they succeed at buying out the grid, the CCA would just be incorporated as the billing department of the new municipal utility, right? And so there's a way in which the CCAs are already really good at this. And so their expertise is really valued and important, and there would be a future role for them. Now, I could imagine a scenario in which down in the future, a CCA might have ambitions to, you know, take over a portion of take over their territory and start, running the poles and wires and whatnot. But of course, that would be something that they would have to want to do and would have to like really, make a strong effort to open the door to that. But I would say this kind of a shift when you no longer have people's interests being protected, people's profit interests, when it's not for profit, so people aren't profiting from the system, then more significant changes to the system become possible because it's not threatening anybody, right? The only people it's threatening is the possibility of stability, right? So you have to like demonstrate that you can do it well. But you're not taking money out of people's pockets. And so they're not going to fight you in the same kind of way.
Mhm.
Sorry, just saw what someone popped into the chat, which sort of answered the question I was going to ask. But before I ask mine, anyone else have a question they'd like to ask?
I
All
did see
right.
that Dave dropped some questions in here.
I did. I just haven't been able to quite find them. I was wondering. Yeah. Anyway, I'll ask one, and we can dig those out of the chat in a minute. First off, a quick question: CCA that you and Joe just referenced. What's the full name of it?
Community choice aggregates.
Thank you. And curious how it came to this assembly person and why you thought they would be a strong supporter of this initiative.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a funny story. So we actually went to her last year with a different bill, far less comprehensive bill idea. And the reason is we have a spreadsheet that lists every assembly member and every senator and how much money they've taken from an IOU. And she's literally the only senator, or she was at the time. We haven't updated it for 2025 yet, but she was literally of 40 senators, 39 of them had taken money from one of the three IOUs, and she was the only one that hadn't. So we thought that, maybe there's a good sign there. And again, we haven't updated it for this year, but as of last year in 2024, in the assembly, there's 80 members, and Alex Lee is the only one that hasn't taken IOU money in the assembly, right? And so that
Yeah,
just gives you a little bit of a sense of what we're up against, right?
yeah.
1 out of 40 senators and 1 out of 40 assembly members.
Well, and the follow-up question to that is there is going to be a lot of pushback on this from the utilities. You just outlined how profitable it is for them, and I don't imagine people give up that sort of profit very easily. Um,
Right.
have you seem like you and your team have really thought this through incredibly well. How much pushback do you expect? Do you have a specific plan already, or is what comes when that happens?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so we've always known that by being in the industry of change, you're gonna be up against the strongest powers that be. I forget, was it Danette was talking about the single payer healthcare effort? It's just like, yeah, I mean, the wealthiest people in the state of California are executives of healthcare in the healthcare industry. So it's like so we know what we're up against, and we also know that like like people's lives depend on it. It's like it's this kind of we're fighting for the kind of society that we want to live in. And well, first off, the IOUs are not popular in California. It's just like if you type in like PG&E into Google News, you're only going to get headlines about fires, about shutoffs, about rate hikes, about profits, about at a time when people can't pay their bills. Um, people really, really hate the IOUs, and the legislators know that. Um, I think with this approach, the feasibility study, so when we did come up with the idea of feasibility study, there was a lot of pushback from people that said, like, who cares about a study? Just like do the thing, take over the IOUs. But it's just like, I mean, that's not going to happen. You can't just like introduce a bill to take over the IOUs and then that's going to pass. But if there's a study that actually lays out a really compelling, comprehensive roadmap that runs all the numbers, and you can point to, look, it's gonna save the people of California this many billions of dollars over this many years. Like that's the point at which we can have a real discussion as a state about do we want to do this or not, right? Those numbers need to be laid out somewhere. And if we reclaim our power were to conduct the study ourselves, everybody would just say, you have an agenda, you have this social justice, goal, like you're not legitimate. But if the state does it because a bill was passed that directed the state to do it, then suddenly like this is an authority that people can take more seriously. Um, and I guess the last thing I'll say about it, I do see the other hands up, is that like it's also kind of hard to argue against the study, right? Because in a healthy democracy, having more data, having more information is just always a good thing, right? To just know what it would imply, what would happen if we were to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, people can be against the idea of the transition, but they can support a study because they're like, yeah, I want to be against it because the numbers are against it. I don't want to be against it because I'm ideologically against it. So I'll leave it at
A great answer. Thank you. So Cheryl, so glad you have a question and love to hear it.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So if we get this passed through both legislative bodies, do you think the governor's going to support this bill?
I think it depends a lot on the messaging. I think it's like so. We're planning on writing an op-ed that'll come out in the next couple weeks if we can find somebody to publish it. Um, a lot of the news coverage, like I said, has been really, really friendly to our talking points as opposed to utility talking points because it's like it's kind of hard to not be. They're announcing record profits at a time where they just asked for the seventh rate hike in the last 13 months. PG&E did, and so it's like the hope is that the governor would be embarrassed to veto it. Now, like we know his connections to the IOUs, so I would not be surprised if he vetoed it. I mean, my expectation actually is that he would veto it, but if we succeed at the narrative building, if we succeed at the cultural shift, then simply to sign a bill that that enables this feasibility study. I mean, obviously, I just told you there's other things in the bill than just the feasibility study, but honestly, if we've done our job and controlled the cultural narrative about the common sense nature of at least just looking into this idea, then maybe there is a scenario in which he signs the bill. So, Danette?
Yeah, I'm under no illusions just because I've been doing this so long. I have no faith in Newsom. I have no faith in the CPUC. I've attended many meetings over the last few years. He appoints the commissioners, so they're all in bed with each other. I think that you hit on a great point. We need people power on this. But that being said, a lot of people are struggling right now. That's the crux I always come up against when I'm trying to get people involved in different issues. People are focused on surviving right now, especially under this administration. They're attacking everything. So that's always what I come up against. How do you get people motivated beyond their own needs to see that this is going to benefit everyone? That's always been a sticking point for me. And realizing what you're up against. This is a really process. I don't know if everyone's aware of how it works. The bill gets introduced. They have amendments. Sometimes they gut it, like you had mentioned, Travis. It goes to another committee, then it gets killed. Even if it makes it through to the second session, which starts, I think, in August, correct me if I'm wrong, it has to go through that whole process again. So it is an uphill battle for most of these bills. And have no illusions about the people in office, because the system is set up this way for a reason. I hate to be negative, but that's just the way it is. I've seen enough of it to know. But get more people involved if you can, because that's what it's going to take,
Yeah, absolutely. Cheryl, I see your hand. Just a really quick in the chat. Paul asked the question, "Who runs the feasibility study?" And I just want to say that we wrote in as many guardrails as we could about who qualifies to run the study, and anyone who has been paid by an IOU, worked for an IOU anytime in the last 3 years, or at least gotten more than, I think these are like more than 10% of their income from an IOU is disqualified. But then we also have the disadvantaged communities advisory group, the DACAG, as the group that creates the rubric of deciding who the winning bid is. And so we really did as much as we could to build some guardrails in. But yeah, friends around the country, public power advocates around the country really emphasize that there's a lot of firms out there that could bid on this and really come up with numbers that show that the IOUs are the best thing that we could ever hope to have. So yeah, we recognize that there's a big risk there. Cheryl, I see you.
Yeah, one or two more questions. Cheryl, please go for it.
Okay, so my next question is, does it have to go through the Appropriations Committee?
I believe well, yeah, so to fund a study, it would, right?
Right. So that's where I would target like a lot of people.
Yeah. That's a good point. So calling all of the senators, and it's going to have to pass the floor eventually, but also who's on the Appropriations Committee.
Everything dies there.
Yeah. So so it has to get through Energy, Utilities, and Communications, and then it has to get through Judiciary. And our analysis is it's the shutoffs part, the shutoff ban that sends it to Judiciary. If that part wasn't in the bill, then it would skip that. And so yeah, so we'll see.
So, Travis, how long have you been working on this?
That's a good question. So my background
Well, I
actually.
only ask good questions, of course.
I appreciate that. So I am actually a social worker by trade. I have an MSW. I went to Chapel Hill in North Carolina, and that's while I was out there, I got involved with some work with the rural electric co-ops of North Carolina that were trying to do solar and storage implementations that would benefit Black farmers, and green the grid and generate local energy that was economically beneficial for the member owners of the co-op. And that was in 2019. I got out here. It was at the time, and I moved to California. It was the time of the no PG&E bailout actions at the CPUC. And then this campaign got started. I started as a volunteer, and then I got hired at Sunwork and worked as a solar technician and I still do that, but I've done that for the last 5 years. And then all 2.5 years ago, got hired by Reclaim Our Power so it kind of came full circle.
You're really good at this. You explain it really well, project so much positive energy, even though you are willing to address how big the battle is. And I think it's so needed to get this sort of root power behind passing things. And I think, one of the things that you mentioned a couple times that really resonated with me was helping with the larger narrative and getting the story out to the public about how this benefits them and helping to build the people power behind it, which is a lot of what we're hoping to do, is get, these coalitions and loose networks supporting each other. So I know you already popped your email in the chat and the link to the form. I will send it out again with the video for everyone. So if people want to get in contact or do things, and I've got a question for the group I'd like to ask before people. What other sort of bills or topics or legislation would you like to
David,
see us have present? Yeah.
can I Can I interject just
Absolutely.
one second? Yeah.
I was going to turn it back to you in a sec. Yeah,
Well,
but go for it,
there's two calls to action that I would also like to
please.
put out. I should have
Please.
said this earlier, but when the bill goes to committee, if anybody is in Sacramento or is willing to go to Sacramento, you can come and in person say that you support the bill. That goes a long way. But then on April 24th, which is a Thursday, we are hosting along with Stop PG&E Now a lobbying day and a major rally in Sacramento at the CPUC. And our goal is to turn out hundreds, if not thousands, of people. We have a broad support, and it's basically the coalition of pissed off ratepayers who say our bills are too damn high. And so CPUC, do your jobs and stop giving them rate hikes, stop giving us rate hikes, and then legislators do your job and pass the bills to change the system. So that's on April 24th. And if you have any interest in joining for that, just send me an email and I will get you linked into the right conversations for that.
And it's also on the website as well, Reclaim Our Power.
Uh, our website is not a great website, but we're trying to get it into
Your
shape.
website's great. No, your website is
Good
great.
idea. We
Okay.
should put that on the website. So.
Okay. I just want to make sure that people who are, if anyone's watching the video, that they're able to get to it as well. So great. Please, I apologize for not giving you the space to include final thoughts. Please go for anything else you want to add on
Yeah,
your side, Travis.
I'm turning back to you. Sorry. I just
Oh,
want to make
no, it's good. I sometimes screw all this up, which is fine. But at least I smile and project a sense of well-being, which is important when you're having a well-being economy alliance. So that helps. Yeah, it covers up for some of my screw-ups. Um, anyway, so the question I just want to ask people can either come on camera or drop in the chat if there's specific topics or bills or other things that they'd like to see speakers come and help promote, get Q&A on. We're eager to help spread the message. Cheryl, please.
Okay, so SB 500 is going to also it's going to the Energy Utility Communications Committee, I think April 27th at this point in time. And the language isn't out yet. It's a spot bill for most. Tomorrow, you should be able to see that proposed language before amendments. But this language will specifically focus on it's a pragmatic approach to reducing utilities, specifically the IOUs rates, and also it actually moves them towards, it gives them choices. So it moves them towards cleaner options. So it also reduces greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. And I get the impression from more than one person that you're very active and promote a lot of things. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And Andy, +1 on the SB 500.
I just heard a
+2.
mysterious voice. Okay, very
Hey,
good.
Andy.
All right. Well, let's all thank Travis for all the hard work he's putting into this and the great presentation. I've seen it before, and he's just really good at this. And so I'm grateful that you took the time to come and explain to yet another place, and hopefully we'll get more people signed on to it. And hopefully we'll see everybody again. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for your
much.
work, Travis. It's invaluable. Everyone needs to take a thread of the tapestry and start pulling. That's the only way we're going to dismantle all this stuff. So
I totally agree. Thanks
Yeah.
so much.